Hey folks, this is Carl from the RO Bucket. A lot of people have questions concerning our end-of-year storage instructions, so I'm going to run you through the process of how to properly store your membranes from the point of view like you're just done processing sap. So right now the RO Bucket's running. Let's pretend this is like the last sap for the season. So this is going to be the last time you run this thing, you're done, you want to put it away. So either you're going to run out of sap, and that's why you're going to turn it off, or you're just done for the season. So this is sap. We're going to pull the intake hose out, and then we're going to wait until all the flow from our needle valve completely stops. We want to run as much sap out of this thing as we possibly can, because the sap in this system is probably fairly concentrated because you've been ROing it, so it might be up to 4, 5, 6%. So we want to get this thing as clean out as possible before we even start flushing it with water. So once it's completely done pushing sap out, I'm going to unplug it. Let it drip for a second. I'm going to pull my sap filter. So this filter has been used to process sap. I'm going to empty the contents of this into my dirty sap bucket. This filter I'm going to discard because this was used for sap and I'm not going to process sap again for another 8 months, so we're just going to get rid of that. If there's any sediment in the bottom of your pre-filter housing, wash this out with water, get it as clean as possible. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put a brand new filter inside this that has never seen sap. Preferably one that you're just unwrapping, so it's never touched anything. So we'll get my new filter, insert my new filter into the housing, the clean housing. Make sure it lines up in the center. Put your cap on. So now I have a new filter in my pre-filter housing. I'm now going to hook everything back up. So now I have a new pre-filter in my RO system. The RO system is relatively empty because I pushed all the concentrated sap out. And then what I'm going to do next is run 15 gallons of water through this system. 15 gallons of water through the system. And the system's completely dry, so I'm going to take my intake hose. I'm going to put it in 15 gallons of water. I'm going to remove my needle valve because you can either keep it open or completely remove it. I like to just completely remove it, especially on the bigger systems. That needle valve can actually cause a decent amount of restriction and slow the process down. So it's really best just to take it right off. All 3 hoses are now in a vessel with 15 gallons of water. I'm now going to plug this system back in. And I'm going to run 15 gallons of water through it. So we'll run 15 gallons of water through this system. Pre-filter's filling back up. Needle valve's off so I get as much flow as possible through this thing. And this is going to take a minute or two to fill the system back up again. It's not going to be quick. So this 15 gallons obviously isn't going to fit in this bucket, but just either fill a bucket 3 times. The goal in this stage is to just get as much residual sugars out of that membrane as possible and get the overall percentage of sugar in this system like to 0.1%. Like basically clean, but not clean enough to sit for 8 months. So right now we're really just kind of desugaring the membrane, getting much out of it as we can. Once you're done running that 15 gallons, so 3 5-gallon buckets or however you want to measure it, again, you're going to pull the intake hose. You're going to let the system run dry again. What this is going to do is now we've desugared these membranes. There's virtually no sugar left in these membranes except at like a parts per million level. Very, very little sugar left in these membranes. So we're going to let this run dry again. The goal for long-term storage, the reason it's different from, even storing for a week, is that when you're storing for a week, it's okay to have, a minuscule amount of sugar left in the system because that's not going to cause a lot of damage. But if you have a minuscule amount of sugar left in these membranes when you're doing this, for 8 months, it's going to start to ferment and it's going to start to grow mold, and it's not going to be good for your RO membranes. So we're going to let this run dry. And then once it runs dry, we're going to unplug it again. And we are going to get a single bucket now, a new batch with 5 gallons of water. 5 gallons of water. So this might sound redundant, running another 5 gallons of clean water through because we just ran 15. But remember, that 15 gallons we just ran through, we were desugaring the membrane, so we didn't necessarily get all of the sugar out. This last new 5 gallon batch of water is going to ensure that all the sugar is out of these membranes. It's also going to clean the surface of the membrane. That's really the important thing. The last 15 gallons, our goal was to get as much sugar out of the system as possible. Now we're going to run this 5 gallons for maybe 10, 15 minutes. Just keep recirculating it to get as much flow across that membrane as possible so that we get any foulants that are on there off the surface of that membrane. So again, all 3 hoses in the same bucket. We're going to plug it back in. And we're just going to let this thing sit and run it for 15 minutes. Okay? Once we're done running it for 15 minutes, we are again going to run the system completely dry. So we're going to pull the intake hose. Again, let the system run completely dry until there's no liquid coming out of our red hose. And then we're going to move on to our last 2 steps. So once the system's completely dry, we're going to unplug it. And we're going to start with a new 5 gallon batch of water. This time at 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So water at 80 degrees Fahrenheit. And in this 5 gallon batch of water, I'm going to put an entire vial of membrane preservative. If you don't have an entire vial of membrane preservative, you can mix it up 10 milliliters per 1 gallon of water. So if you have 20 milliliters left from the season, I would make 2 gallons of membrane preservative solution. If you only have 10 milliliters left, you're only going to be able to make a gallon of it. You really just need enough so that it can fill the system and come out of the red hose, and you can keep recirculating that preservative mixture. You literally just need enough to be able to recirculate it in whatever container you're doing it in. So now I have 80 degree water with my membrane preservative. I am now going to put all 3 hoses in the same container as I did last time. This is empty now because from the previous step this system was empty, so it's gonna suck a lot of this in, right? So we're going to plug this back in. I am now drawing the preservative mixture at 80 degrees Fahrenheit through the system, and it's all going back into the same container. So once the system's full, I'm not going to end up using anymore. The level of the solution is going to stay the same in the bucket. At that point, just kind of walk away from it for 30 minutes and just let this thing run for 30 minutes. And after 30 minutes, before you shut it off, you're going to, again, pull the intake hose and run this system completely dry so that we get as much preservative solution out of this system as possible. And the reason we want the preservative solution out of the system is because the pH might be a little bit too high for long-term storage, and we don't want to do any damage to the membranes. So what we're going to do is run it dry and then rinse it with as little water as possible to fill the system back up and purge the pump head of any of that membrane solution so that the pump's in nice clean water so that it can sit for off-season storage without any negative effects. So once you pump all of the membrane preservative solution out, you're again going to unplug the system. You are going to get a couple gallons of water. I say a couple because, with an RB5 you only need a gallon. With an RB25 you might need 2 gallons. Whatever amount of water you need to get this intake hose into, fill the system up and get constant discharge out of the red hose. We don't want to completely dilute this system down because there's still going to be preservative in there left over. Even though we ran it out, it's still going to be in there. We just want to run enough water through this to just completely fill it up again and then shut it off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug it in. And as soon as I get constant flow out of the red hose, still bubbling, pushing air, still pushing air. Still pushing a little air, a little bubbly. And That's a nice steady flow now. That's all you gotta do. You gotta unplug it. This system is now completely full of water, which is now a relatively diluted preservative mixture. I'm gonna let this red hose kind of drip here for a minute, as well as your permeate hose. Let those drip down. Because we don't want these dripping into the bucket. So once they stop naturally dripping, you're just going to coil them up, keep them in the top of the bucket. When you undo your intake hose, it is going to leak down a little bit. So you can either leave it hooked up and just set your intake hose into the top of the bucket like that. Or if you want to unhook it, it'll just drip for you know, a minute or two. Just make sure it doesn't make a mess. But that won't drain the system because it's not going to drain anything past this upper hose on the filter housing. So you can pull your intake hose out, coil that up. I recommend you leave the top off the bucket so that the pump isn't sitting in a humid environment because it can cause issues with the brushes and stuff in it. So make sure everything's nice and dry, but make sure the membrane is completely full of water, and you can just leave the system like that. Let me know if you have any questions on this video. Like always, you can email us at sales@drobucket.com, and always check our website for new video postings and updates. Thank you.